This nun was 21 when she made her escape in the 1990s. She had been in prison since she was 16 for speaking out for a free Tibet.
My friend, she was unable to walk, and myself, my feet were giving me so much problem. But still I kept holding her, and she kept falling to the side. The blanket which I had with me, I tied it around myself to keep it from falling. Except for that, we had to leave everything behind. Then I tried to carry my friend on my back, tied up with a piece of rope. She was so heavy, and we fell down together from where it seemed impossible to move again. Then I started crying out, "His Holiness, I'm dying." In my heart, I was feeling so miserable with the thought that my death is going to be such a waste. The other people said, "Leave her behind, let her die here." And I said that death never comes so easily, and especially we shouldn't leave even her dead body in a foreign country. While crying, I still kept on carrying her.
This nun survived. Her friend who had been with her in prison died on the way in Nepal. For 36 years, Tibetans have been living as refugees in northern and southern India. Today, nearly 130,000 Tibetans live in settlements administered by the Tibetan government in exile under the guidance of His Holiness, with support from the Indian government, Western individuals and organizations. When they first arrived in India, many Tibetans could not endure the change in climate and succumbed to diseases unknown in Tibet. The men and women who survived worked as laborers building mountain roads in North India. Later, Tibetan refugees began to make a slightly better living from farming, carpet weaving and small business. All Tibetan children, boys and girls, were sent to Tibetan schools organized by His Holiness within the first years of exile life. An overnight journey from Delhi, outside the bustling city of Dehradun, lies Digiling Tibetan settlement. Dorji Wangmo eventually settled here. Like many of the women, she earns a meager living from weaving traditional Tibetan aprons called pangden.
Many of us Tibetans were sent up to Sikkim. We were sent for road construction work. At that time, I was unmarried with no children, so I was able to do the job, that of a man. I could carry stones, soil, etc., as heavy as a man could carry. But then, within that year, I got pregnant. For some time after the birth of the baby, I still worked as a laborer on the road. I used to leave my baby sleeping on the roadside while I was working. I was dependent on 9 rupees earning every month, and I was the only one to bring up my child. I had a very difficult time. I had to work as a laborer and look after the child alone. The few ornaments given to me by my parents, I had to sell them off. Looking after my child, working as a laborer, I spent 3 years in Sikkim. But then, since the child was growing up fast, I had to think about his education. I had to think of sending him off to a school. I didn't want him to be like myself, illiterate. Then I moved to Darjeeling. While in Darjeeling, I worked as a washerwoman and as a laborer to support myself. And I was able to admit my son at the age of 7 in a school. And then again I got pregnant. But I still continued with my work as a washing woman, working as a laborer, and doing odd jobs. I worked very hard.
From the beginning, women played an integral role in maintaining Tibetan traditions in the family and society. They contributed equally to the economic livelihood of the community as farmers, carpet weavers, and traders. Today, Tibetan settlements are stable communities. The Tibetans live modestly. The Tibetan culture and religion, identity and traditions are kept alive in the midst of modern developments and Indian culture. Preservation of Tibetan culture and religion has become an ever more urgent task as the years under occupation have slowly undermined all aspects of Tibetan identity. The exiled Tibetan community has embraced the dual challenge of preserving tradition while consciously moving towards a more modern democratic society. This has naturally expanded the role of Tibetan women. Tibetan refugees have moved from traditional roles into all sectors of the community, from teaching and administration, serving in high and elected posts in the Tibetan government in exile, and going for higher education.
I feel that the exile life span of 35 years has also brought a lot of positive changes in the life of women, which is that the first step His Holiness took once he came to live in India was to set up a system of education that's suitable for the Tibetans. And then at one shot, he said that send all your children to school. He never said boys to school and girls at home. So I feel that this was a major and a positive step, particularly for the women. And as a result, today we have most of the young women educated and able to think better, able to see things better. But then there's also the difference between the women who came as mothers in 1959 and women who are now mothers or office workers or whatever you call them. So this change is partly due to the life that we had to face, and mainly because we did not forget that we are Tibetans.
Tibetan people are very lucky because we have a very rich ancient culture and tradition, and of course that's all. On top of that we have the traditional Buddhist belief, which is now of course internationally acknowledged as some form of science or religion which is accepted and respected by many. So I think to begin with that, I think we have some very rich background to go by, and I think it's important to keep that, because when we look at, when we are exposed to the what we would call the modern development, I think it's very important for younger generation to remember that our root comes first, because without that, just getting some outside culture and outside education doesn't seem to fulfill what we need as Tibetans.
Women's participation in Tibetan exile politics and freedom movement greatly increased in 1984 with the re-emergence in exile of the Tibetan Women's Association. A central office was set up in Dharamsala, where the Tibetan government in exile is based. Women in the settlements established regional TWA chapters.
In 1984, the Tibetan Women's Association was revived again, reactivated again, and so since then the Tibetan Women's Association was formed officially here in Dharamsala, and the important aim and objective of the formation of revivation of that association was to carry on the struggle of those brave Tibetan women who led the demonstrations inside Tibet on March 12, 1959, and continue the struggle working towards the betterment of their Tibetan people and the freedom of their country, Tibet.
Today, Tibetan Women's Association is a registered non-governmental organization with 36 chapters in India and abroad and over 9,000 members. While conditions and opportunities for women living in exile have improved vastly since the early days, women inside Tibet face declining opportunities for education and employment, environmental degradation, loss of resources, and increasing restrictions on their basic rights.
Problems are everywhere in Tibet. Almost everyone has a problem there. You may have the ability to work, but there is no job. Wherever you go, the Chinese are there telling you a different story. As for religion, there is absolutely no right, not like in India. If you want to say a prayer, you have to say it in secret, or make up a secret time at home to say your prayer. As for women in general, what could I tell? As for problems, women who have children and no way to send them to school, that is the greatest problem. Especially with no job, no resources, it is natural